I mean, the first thing he did was he said, sit down. Would you like a whiskey, as it's tea time? And he poured me what looked like half a pint of whiskey in a beer mug, sat me down, then went sort of out of my view behind me, pulled out a revolver, put it to my head and pulled the trigger. And then he said, you didn't blink. You're obviously not a born killer. I think in writing the life of Gavin Maxwell, I learnt a lot about compassion. That you see the life of a human being from the moment that person was born to the moment that person drew his last breath. You see the immense slog of getting through a life. Most human lives are littered with tragedy and difficulty. And the biographer can see it all coming, whereas your subject couldn't see it all coming.
Gavin Maxwell was one of Scotland's greatest writers. Born into the aristocracy in Galloway, he was a natural animal handler and observer, as well as a great shot and hunter. In his younger years, he had been a portrait painter, a shark fisher, a small arms instructor, and an explorer. But it was in the late 1940s he found his true vocation, writing. His first book, Harpoon at a Venture, recalled his exploits as a shark fisherman on the island of Sohe. A reed shaken by the wind about exploring the Iraqi marshes is considered to be a travel classic. But it was not until he wrote A Ring of Bright Water about living with otters on the western seaboard of Scotland that he achieved international recognition. Although fame, along with his book sales, have dwindled, Gavin Maxwell lives on through the memories of his colleagues and friends.
In The House of Elrig, his autobiography of childhood, he describes himself as an incurable romantic with a tinge of melancholy. And at times, the melancholy overcame the romance.
When I read Douglas Botting's biography, the very first page says, look, if you're looking to find out anything about Gavin Maxwell's lovers, you know, forget it, you're not going to find it in here. And I thought, I don't believe you. I've got to read it because it must be here, must be, but it wasn't. But in fact, there's no point in wondering about anyone in Gavin Maxwell because Gavin's given us these wonderful pictures of the west coast of Scotland, and I don't think asking questions about his sexuality helps us to look at them.
Well, he was much funnier, I think, than people really remember. He was also very accident-prone, terribly accident-prone, and he was much happier when he was in the company of children and people whom he regarded as very unthreatening friends.
He's very kind. He loved children. He used to take me out from school. I saw quite a lot of him. He was always a great storyteller, very amusing, and when he was with other people, he was a sort of the life of the party.
I think he's the sort of individual whose reputation goes before him. You know, you heard all about his domestic life and about, you know, his animals and his birds and all the rest of it. You know, he really sort of was a deep, intense individual, but nonetheless one who had a very good mind and who understood the whole ecological wildlife social situation in the West Highlands more than he made out very often.
When Gavin said, why don't you come up to Sandegg? This was in my last Easter term at university. We went up in his Bentley Roadster, which was a fairly alarming experience. He was an ex-racing driver. So there was no motorway, he went up the A1, all the twists and turns, and I mean, he was driving flat out in this huge car. Terrific squeals of tyres as he went round the, you know, corners and gear changes. Said he normally was much better in a fast car if he was drunk, but fortunately this didn't happen until we got to Scotch Corner, and so it then became quite a hairy ride up to the West Highlands, and we stopped at all his old chums' houses, his harpoon gunners and his ex-SOE or commando friends, and all would have a wee dram for the road, you know. And eventually, thank God, we got to the end of the road, literally, at Mallaig, and got onto a steamer which somebody... At that point that Gavin began to discuss with me what he should write next. He said, I've written a little sample of text of another book about Sandaig, which we're going to. Would you care to read it? This piece of writing about a place, you know, that I'd ever read.
When I turned to the sea, it was so pale and polished that the figures of the twins, thigh-deep in the shallows, showed an almost pure silhouette against it. Bronze-coloured limbs and torsos edged with yellow light. They were shouting and laughing, dancing and scooping the water with their hands, and all the time as they moved, there shot up from the surface where they broke it a glittering spray of small gold and silver fish, so dense and brilliant as to blur the outline of the childish figures.
I think Gavin heard us shouting and screaming and he came out to see what was happening.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, yes, quite vividly. Out in the sand there, warm summer evening. It was, I think it was probably predators chased them in from deeper water into the shallows, and they were there in the millions, really in the millions, and it was harmful. We were trying to catch them, but just slipping out of our fingers. And it was fun chasing through them. It was just deep, foot deep of fish, tiny little silver goldfish. Like,
We were fish drunk, crazy, fish happy in that shining orange bubble of air and water. The twins were about 13 years old and I was about 38. But the miracle of the fishes drew from each of us the same response.
I said, well, it's magical if the whole book was like that. So he then said, well, what shall I call it? There are two possibilities. It could be called Raven Seek Thy Brother. The other title was borrowed, he said, from a poem which his poet friend Kathleen Raine had written.
He has married me with a ring of bright water whose ripples travel from the heart of the glitter broadcast on the swift river.
And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, a ring of bright water is very magical and romantic. So he said, okay, oh well, anything you say, chum. You know, you know, he's always saying anything you say, chum, and then you go and do something different. But in this instance, that's what he called it, a ring of bright water. And it became, I think I'm right in saying, the third biggest post-war non-fiction bestseller. And it was on the American best-selling list for more than a year. And I think at the time that I wrote the biography, I sold about 1.5 million copies or something like that. I mean, it struck a chord.
That book had an enormous impression on the Western world at that moment. And it seems to have filled an extraordinary gap in people's psyche. It was a huge escape from the real world. Here was this man who had thrown over the values of the whole Western world, it seemed, and disappeared to a remote location on the western seaboard of the Highlands of Scotland, which in itself was, of course, a very different place in those days, very remote, very cut off, and moved into a tumble-down house with a couple of otters.
I think it must have been spring 1950. Gavin had invited me out, and then one day Gavin said, why don't you try and get use of that place opposite over there. It was a ruined cottage then.
Rafe Payne was a lifelong friend who still uses the cottage behind the remains of Gavin's famous home.
And there are the islands, there's the coast. There we go. There we are.
Jimmy Watt came to Sandaig as a young teenager to help Gavin run the household. At the age of 15, Jimmy quickly learned the skills of boating, mending and cooking. He became a trusted friend and confidant until Gavin's death.
Oh, well, come on in. Come on, come on, come on. That's good, bit of light. There we are. Just shut the windows open now, and that'll bring daylight in. It's marvellous, isn't it? Incredibly lucky to have the use of it. The chimney's a bit chilly, so it'll smoke for a moment or so, but it soon gets going. It sometimes comes out in odd places. You may feel a bit of smoke coming out under there. But it doesn't do any harm.
How far was Gavin's house from here?
Just across there, you can see the stone, the big stone, do you notice? That's where, that marks the spot where his desk was.
The house was just over there, where that large stone is, a boulder there. And that's the site of the house. It's also where Gavin's ashes are buried. We dug a large hole and popped him in there. And so he's underneath he's underneath that big stone. So that's where the house was. But it didn't face the sea. It faced into the hillside. In those days, the houses, they put their shoulder into the wind.
Oh, yes.
There's the house.
Stockade round it, yes. Already. And the snow stemming had been taken up to the eaves?
Who shot it?
Gavin's brother Eustace. There was a master copy and then there was a cutting copy, and the master copy was kept in a tin, and I think that was lost at Sandaig in the fire. And then I'd assumed that everything was lost in the fire, but then this turned up 25 years later.
Oh, there's Gavin.
In London. So we were delighted to have any of it at all.
I sit in a pine-pitch panelled kitchen living room with an otter asleep on its back among the cushions on the sofa, the forepaws in the air and with the expression of tightly shut concentration that very small babies wear in sleep. Beyond the door is the sea, whose waves break on the beach no more than a stone's throw distance, and encircling mist-hung mountains. A little group of grey-like geese sweep past the window and alight upon the small carpet of green turf. But for the soft, contented murmur of their voices and the sounds of the sea and the waterfall, there is utter silence.
He knew that it would be a winner. I mean, he didn't go into it knowing that it was going to be very profitable, which it was, but he just knew that he'd captivated a part of himself in this place, and it was the right time, I think, for that.
Bring Bright Water did two things for Gavin. It made him famous and it made him rich. I guess within, say, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, it earned him about £500,000.
I suppose when I left school and went to college in the early 60s, he was top of the best-selling list with Ring of Bright Water, which was published in the Evening Standard once a week, the best-selling book. And I think he overtook Lady Chatterley's Lover at the time, which caused a sort of small headline, Otters get on top of Lady Chatterley's Lover. It was the first time I realized that he was a sort of famous, if you like.
I was there when the Ring was being written, so I was reading it as it was written, hot off the press. It was a very good summer, and he spent the summer lying up by the waterfall, with the sound of the waterfall, and lying there in the sun, and just writing in longhand, straight off. Hardly a correction. Foolscap pages, notebooks, and just, he started it off and just wrote and wrote. This is where he lay to write most of Ring of Bright Water, which is about 50 yards, 100 yards from the house. So he spent most of the summer here with the sound of the waterfall, and we'd even come up, feed him up, bring food up, and the odd dram. And Gavin felt this was where the soul or the heart of Sandaig was. He in fact wrote, he said, if there was any part of himself that would return, this is where it would come back to.
again.
Mad sad man again.
You have got a beard.
I have got a beard. How disgusting.
In a minute, Teco takes a great bite out of you. Not out of you, but he gets a mouthful of your flesh.
Had plenty to spare.
There, can you see it?
Yeah. That's Jimmy. I think, wasn't it? Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Soon after I arrived here, well, I just got the job here, I found that I was actually, well, I was forced into coping with things and incidents. I mean, Gavin was very incident-prone. Some people would say disaster-prone, but I would say incident-prone. So it was a matter of mending and making do and just holding things together. I mean, I dreaded him getting into anything, any machine or car or boat or something like that, because you knew that something would have to be sorted out afterwards. I mean, he was happy to leave me running things when he went away, as he did every winter. You know, he travelled, so I was left here. It suited me fine. Yeah. I loved it. I loved it. I loved the whole thing. Yeah. Well, most of it. Yeah. There were obviously, you know, living with a genius is always difficult.
Did you see him as your father?
I know that that's how I saw him, quite early on. I mean, I was certainly looking for some sort of father figure, but it didn't happen like that immediately. But I think latterly he came to see me like that too, and I hope that's what he felt when he went, and I think it's what he did feel. Yeah.
Midge, come and meet Mary.
Does he bite?
Sometimes.
The film, Ring of Bright Water, starred Born Free husband and wife team, Bill Travers and Virginia McKenna.
Midge, after an Arab Sheikh.
I couldn't imagine there were many people who hadn't read the book, actually, by the time we did the film. It was so hugely popular, and I found it one of the most wonderful books I've ever read. His descriptive writing is extraordinary. I mean, it's tangible. When you go to places that he's written about, I mean, you know what you're going to see, because it's there in your mind already.
He didn't go to the premiere, but he had his own premiere in Newton Stewart. And when it was over, he did mutter to someone, "It's not quite what I expected."
What a pleasant surprise. Didn't expect you here.
I just thought I'd come and meet the bus.
And how's the most beautiful doctor in Scotland?
Fine.
And Midge?
Well,
I know you're going to tell me that he's wrecked the surgery and half frightened Jenna to death.
Midge is dead. When Gavin finally did see the film, he wrote Bill the most wonderful letter, which I think was one of his most treasured things that he ever received. Just saying how he felt the film had sort of encapsulated a certain fragment of his life, and how pleased he was with the way it was done.
I wrote this little piece called A Fall of Bright Water to take on tour around the west coast of Scotland. Kind of exploration of Gavin Maxwell and his landscape. All the other nights had gone okay, the show's going well, but come to do it in Glenelg. Well, I thought, oh dear, this could be tricky. But Glenelg, the road seemed very narrow all of a sudden, and I mustn't say that. There must be a better way of saying this, oh dear. What will Jimmy think? Oh no, try it this way. Now, so I'm sitting there working out all nice ways not to hit anything while I'm going through this show. And then someone comes up to me, a complete stranger, and says, "You'll not be mentioning the man who killed the otter."
I'll bet the water's cold up there at the falls, Doctor.
It was indeed, Angus.
You may think at first it's a question, and you realise the voice didn't go up at the end. It's a statement, but it's a statement about a state of affairs in the future, so it's actually an instruction. You will not be mentioning the man who killed the otter. Well, of course I was. God, it was quite a crucial moment in there. He's seriously ill in the hospital, and his son is coming to see your show. And really, It's like all the things are do's and don'ts already piled up in my head. And that was the last one, just tipped the whole thing over.
Angus!
Well, I thought I was okay. A big hug from Jimmy afterwards. I squeezed my hand, and I haven't seen him since.
I remember when he rang us up when Midgeville had just been killed by the roadman. He rang us up very early one morning. He was absolutely devastated by that. Perhaps he transferred his unsatisfactory relationships with human beings to the animal world.
All through his life, he'd ring people up about 2 in the morning and say, if you don't come round immediately, I shall kill myself. So what do? You go round, and then he's as full as a cricket. Gets a bottle of whiskey, has a party. But undoubtedly, when he made the call, he was a bit down.
Sometimes he would come to Kinlochhew. He would arrive in his Mercedes with, I remember, smoke coming out of the brake hubs, arriving there and a bottle in the seat beside him, and coming in, and then he would, you know, tell us why he came and what all his troubles were.
By being famous, exposed his Shangri-La to the world at large, and it became a kind of, not a tourist centre, but a venue or a shrine for fans to come down to, and they come down all hours of the day down the track. There was an American couple came down, I think, about 10 o'clock at night, banged on the door and said, you know, what's the Ring of Bright Water author? We come all the way from, you know, Connecticut to see you, and so on. And he said, well, you can go all the way back to Connecticut. Yeah, he said, I'm just having my dinner. A number of people noticed a sea change in Gavin at a certain point in his life after Ring of Bright Water came out. He had been one kind of person, a rather retiring, sensitive, private person, but he became more difficult. He became a desperate man.
On the 21st of January 1968, Gavin's house at Sandaig was accidentally destroyed by fire. His otter, Ethel, was burnt to death.
After it was burnt down, Gavin lost everything except what he was standing up in. Robin had a view that if ever you were in a disaster, you could always do with £100. So he sent him £100. Gavin spent it all on a memorial for the otter. A stone memorial for the otter, which I think is still standing there.
Every year this changes, there's more and more stones and shells, and then they fall off and they get buried, and then more people put more things in. Sometimes there's money that he's searching for.
Gavin used to talk to Edel, and you say, it's very strange, because he used to go, you are so fine, she said, you are so fine, she said. You are so fine, she said, you are so fine, she said.
And when Ring of Bright Water burns down, this is a definitive moment of change in his life. He takes up residence not in some comfortable place by, you know, some road with convenient little village nearby, but on a rock.
The island cottages are probably only 250 yards from the shore at Kylakin on Skye. And when you arrived, you came over to Skye on the ferry, and then you walked up the road until you were opposite, and then there was a telephone kiosk there, and you telephoned across, and then he would send a dinghy across to collect you. And the very first time that I did this, I got into the telephone kiosk, and I said, hello, Gavin, it's John, I've arrived. And he said, yes, I know you have. It's time you stopped picking your nose. Because he used to sit, rather like a sort of predatory bird, outside the door in the sun, with a little telescope on a table, eyeing the world. And you know, I've often thought that this analogy is very true of Gavin Maxwell. He was very happy to observe the world, but on his own terms and from a distance.
On behalf of the two local communities and the Born Free Foundation, I would like to thank you, Minister, very much indeed, and the Scottish Office, for handing over the care of Aileen Ban to the Aileen Ban Trust.
The Scottish Office officially handed over the keys of the island to the Aileen Ban Trust, of which the Born Free Foundation is a member. And so now it's up to us to look after it, restore everything, and this is what we're now busy doing. I want to create the long room, which was Gavin's sitting room, drawing room, in a kind of symbolic way, not exactly how it was, we could never do that, but give an impression of what it was like in his time, so that when people come in the boat from Kyleakin in small groups to have an experience on the island, go on the nature trail, see the long room, they will have a feeling of what it was like in his time.
When I met him for the last time on Kyleakin Island, I think he was a very lost soul and didn't know where he was going or what he was going to do next. He was in deep trouble medically. His cancer was wasn't just one primary, there were secondaries, etc. It's very, very difficult to know where Gavin could have gone from the final. In a sense, his life had reached its natural concluding point. The fact that he died was an amazing coincidence, but I think inside he was dying. I think he'd done it. He had written himself out in terms of using his own life story as the subject matter of his books.
Those that met him have been really almost charged with an intensity of what he was doing and why he was doing it. And the whole of that West Coast area, you know, if you meet people who knew him or came into contact with him, it left an indelible mark with them. So in that respect, I think he's left a lot for Scotland. His books are very beautiful and they will go on for a very long time.
There is a legacy which relates to time and to place. There were very, very few people who were able intellectually to open up the Highlands in those days. And Gavin is very substantially responsible for interesting the wider public in the wild Highlands. There is a place for Gavin Maxwell in the iconography of wild land in Scotland.
I am quite certain in my own mind that man has suffered in his separation from the soil and the other living creatures of the world. The evolution, as it were, of his intellect has outrun his needs as an animal, and that now still he must, for his own security, look long at some part of the earth as it was before he started messing about with it.